Former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, once again, discriminated against, according to her, inside of a local Atlanta restaurant. Put up the picture full mask. We've reported on a similar situation prior. For the second time in as many years, former Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms said she was denied service at an Atlanta area restaurant because she was dressed in yoga pants, violating what the hostess called a strictly enforced business casual policy. There's more. But Bottoms who served one term as Atlanta's mayor, starting in 2018, tweeted Wednesday she witnessed other patrons, quote, none of whom looked like me, dressed in shorts, baseball caps, and flip-flops. Bottoms, a senior advisor to Kamala Harris and Tim Walz presidential ticket, did not disclose the name of the restaurant because she did not want the staff threatened. That's what happened in 2022 after the former mayor went public following a similar incident at Capital Grille, a restaurant located at Perimeter Mall in the Atlanta suburb of Dunwoody. While Keisha Lance Bottoms was mayor, she believed in things like equitable outcomes, fair opportunities. She spoke the language of diversity, equity, and inclusion, attempted to create policies and successfully did enact some policies, making the city safer and more progressive, such as decriminalizing marijuana. She championed the shutting down of the city jail, making sure that individuals who committed a crime of survival had an opportunity at a nonprofit help-based program. Here's some of that.
We had a plan based on equity in Atlanta. It was based on addressing those systemic issues of racism, income inequality. You go down the list. We were already focused on it. The uncertainty and the complexities of 2020 that we didn't anticipate, while we're dealing with what's needed in our immediate response to these challenges, on the other hand, we're still working a One Atlanta plan to make sure that we're closing that income inequality gap that I mentioned, that we're dealing with criminal justice reform, these long-term challenges and issues that our communities are calling upon us to address. But at the same time, having to balance that with the day-to-day, having to recreate how we manage our day-to-day city operations based on where we've been with the social justice movement and with COVID-19.
That was a very trying time for the city, for politicians across the nation, and obviously for everyday people. According to Mayor Bottoms, she said she was denied seating because she wore leggings, violating the eatery's dress code. Bottoms said she found it, quote, odd that she could not wear what she described as mall attire at a restaurant that's located inside a mall. Quote, rules are the rules. Just wonder if the woman who came in immediately after me, who I did not see come back out, was also denied service. I was again told by a hostess that I could not be seated in an Atlanta area restaurant, not the same one as last time, because I had on yoga pants, which was supposedly against their strictly enforced business casual policy. After I pointed out that there were patrons, none on its website, the Capital Grille said it promises a refined atmosphere and thus proper dress is required. Gym attire, tank tops, sweatpants, hats, and items with offensive language are not allowed. But social media users were going to provide examples that show the rules were not always followed and posted pictures of mostly white patrons wearing prohibited clothing items. Quote, Black Democrat Mayor of Atlanta, my friend Keisha Lance Bottoms, was refused service at Capital Grille back then, but white folk in gym clothes and t-shirts were totally fine at Capital Grille. Actor Daniel Newman tweeted at the time. Bottoms said the manager of the undisclosed restaurant eventually offered to seat her and her friend 1 hour later, but she left. She said she wanted to connect with the owner. I would like to know if others are having this experience, she said. I think people forget Keisha Lance Bottoms is an attorney. And she was actually a judge at one point before becoming a city council member and then thus the mayor of Atlanta. And when she talks about these dynamics, obviously it's not from the contextualization of a citizen only, but it's also a citizen that has a particular background in law and equal application thereof. If you have a building, a restaurant, where the public is allowed to dine, you fall under something called the Public Accommodations Act. And you, as the restaurant, must apply the rules of engagement equally to everybody. It can't be on certain days or certain people, they can have access wearing clothing that violates the policy, and then, other folks cannot. All right. We know what these dress codes are typically about, Senator. At the core of them, we have seen them being utilized as a proxy to race-based policies without calling them race-based policies. This is the second time Keisha Lance Bottoms has experienced something like this. And it's not because, I don't think it's because they're targeting her. Many times the hostess has no idea who she is. It's because this is how much it happens in the city of Atlanta and the metropolitan area around. What say you?
Oh yeah, Doc, that bias, the biases
Mhm.
are creeping up. They're part of American life, and we get examples like this from something as we might say first world problem in terms of being able to eat at a restaurant, all the way to a legal system that is not does not always mete out justice to Black people, especially other people of color, and then poor people across the board. The mayor, though, in her astuteness, and I'm glad, Doc, that you reminded folks of what her pedigree is. You shouldn't have to have one. You shouldn't have to have a special title to be treated
That's right.
fairly. If these are the rules, and the mayor brought up a good point, Doc, that if you're outside a mall, people go to the mall shopping in different types of attire is different from it being a standalone restaurant. But I digress. If in fact these are your rules, then you can't make them subjective. They have to
That's
be
right.
very strictly enforced on everybody, no matter how they identify, period. But it seems as though, and we know it to be true, that in this case and many other cases, that it is very much subjective, and the subject of it mainly is Black folks. That's really what this is. And so they just been caught. And they done messed around and found out this time, because if I were the manager of that restaurant, if I were the owner of the restaurant, not only would I be upset, dismayed, disturbed that patrons are being treated this way, I would especially, because this is called understanding who you're dealing with, I would especially be upset that the former mayor of the city of Atlanta was treated this way. Because if she is treated this way with all her pedigree, it shouldn't matter, Doc, but I'm just saying, if she is treated this way, then the average person coming there, the average worker, the average citizen, then imagine what they have to go through as well.
Yeah, and I know some people will say, well, this is really a non-issue in comparison to some other dynamics, and I disagree, and here's why. Everybody has a point of entry or a gateway into the fight, into the struggle. And I can name absolute occurrence and person. Individual was famous, had money, and then something happened to them. Maybe it was on a Delta airline. Maybe it was at a theme park. But they got introduced to racism and prejudice in a way that was in their face, and so much in their face that it made them become part of the fight. So everybody has their gateway. I'm appreciative of people like Keisha Lance Bottoms for speaking up, because what you will find more often than not, individuals with some influence and a little bit of prestige in politics in particular, they are reluctant to go on record about these instances that happen to them. And so I applaud them for being willing to say something, because it is still not a popular thing to say racist things happen if you are in the city of Atlanta and connected to the network of Atlanta politics.